At 10:30 on February 20, 1945, Private First Class Jacklyn Harold Lucas crouched in a trench on Iwo Jima. He watched two Japanese Type 97 hand grenades roll toward him, and three other Marines threw black volcanic sand. He was 17 years old. It was 6 days past his birthday. This was his 5th day in a combat zone. This counted if you included stowing away aboard United States ship Duel to get there. The grenades had perhaps 4 seconds before detonation. Standard doctrine advised yelling a warning about grenades. It also said to dive away from the blast and pray the shrapnel would miss. Lucas did not dive away. He dove toward them instead. The math was simple. There were 4 Marines in the trench. They faced 2 grenades. The fragmentation radius of each was 50 feet. If both grenades exploded, all 4 might die. Definitely 2 would die. Probably 3 would die, unless one Marine covered both grenades with his body. Lucas had less than 3 seconds to make that decision. This decision would either save his friends or kill him. Most likely, it would do both. He chose both. February 1945, Iwo Jima. 0 American submarines had ever charged a Japanese destroyer and survived. 0 pilots had outmaneuvered Zeros in a dogfight until the thatch weave. 0 17-year-olds had thrown themselves on 2 grenades and lived to tell about it. This was until Jack Lucas. However, let us back up. This story does not start on February 20, 1945. It starts on December 7, 1941. A 13-year-old boy in Plymouth, North Carolina heard the news about Pearl Harbor. He decided that sitting out the war was not an option. Jack Lucas was not a normal 13-year-old. He was 5 feet 8 inches tall and weighed 180 pounds. He was built like a full-grown man. He had been attending military academy. There he learned to march, to shoot, and everything except patience. When Pearl Harbor was hit, Lucas made a decision. He was going to war. Never mind that he was 13. Never mind that the minimum enlistment age was 17 with parental consent, and 18 without it. Never mind any of that. On August 6, 1942, Jacklyn Lucas walked into a Marine Corps recruiting office in Norfolk, Virginia. He had documents. This included a birth certificate showing he was 17. He also had a parental consent form with his mother's signature. Every single document was forged. He had bribed a notary. He faked the signature. He lied about everything except his name. The recruiter looked at this kid. This big, stocky, dead serious kid. The recruiter then sent him to Paris Island. At 14 years old, Jack Lucas became a United States Marine. Boot camp at Paris Island included physical training that broke grown men. It also had rifle qualification and heavy weapons training. Lucas qualified as a heavy machine gun crewman. He was assigned to the 6th Base Depot of the 5th Amphibious Corps. His destination was Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Here was the problem. Pearl Harbor was not a combat zone. It was a logistics base and a supply depot. It was a rear echelon assignment. This was everything Jack Lucas had lied, cheated, and forged documents to avoid. The Marine Corps discovered his real age in 1943. They found this through a letter he wrote to his 15-year-old girlfriend. They did not discharge him, which would have been the smart move. However, they certainly were not sending him into combat. They gave him a truck and made him a driver. They told him to be grateful he was not in the brig. Jack Lucas spent 1943 and most of 1944 driving a truck around Hawaii. Other Marines died on Tarawa, Saipan, Peleliu, and Tinian during this time. He was done waiting. January 10, 1945. Pearl Harbor. Lucas walked out of his barracks wearing a khaki uniform. He had his dungarees and field shoes rolled under his arm. He told nobody where he was going. The United States ship Duel sat at the dock. It was a transport ship. It was carrying the 1st Battalion, 26 Marines, 5th Marine Division. The ship was bound for an island called Iwo Jima, which most Marines had never heard of. Lucas climbed aboard. He hid in a landing craft. He slept on the weather deck. He ate whatever he could scavenge. His cousin Samuel Oliver Lucas was aboard. Sam helped him stay hidden for 29 days. 29 days passed. On February 8, one day before he would be classified as a deserter, Lucas turned himself in to Captain Robert Dunlap. Captain Dunlap was the commanding officer of C Company. Captain Dunlap could have thrown him in the brig. He could have had him court-martialed. Instead, Dunlap looked at this kid who had stowed away on a combat transport just to get into the fight. He then took him to Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Pollock, the battalion commander. Pollock reduced Lucas to private. He assigned him to Dunlap's rifle company as a rifleman. This punishment was exactly what Lucas wanted. February 14, 1945. This was 5 days before the invasion of Iwo Jima. Jack Lucas turned 17 years old at sea. He was sailing toward the most fortified 8 square miles of volcanic rock in the Pacific Ocean. Iwo Jima was 8 square miles. It had 21,000 Japanese defenders. There were 18 miles of tunnels and 750 pillboxes and fortified bunkers. Artillery pieces were hidden in caves. Machine gun nests were in every crater. Mines were on every beach. The Japanese commander, Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, had spent 8 months turning Iwo Jima into a fortress. He ordered his men to conduct no banzai charges. He also ordered no suicidal attacks. They were to defend every inch and make the Americans pay in blood for every foot of ground. Math was ugly. The American invasion force consisted of 70,000 Marines. There were 3 divisions. These were the 3rd, 4th, and 5th Marine Divisions. It was the largest Marine operation in Pacific Theater history. Expected casualties were 7,000. Actual casualties would be 26,000, with 6,821 Americans dead. On February 19, 1945, at 900 hours, the first wave of Marines hit the beach. Jack Lucas came ashore in the afternoon wave with C Company, 1st Battalion, 26th Marines. He did not have a weapon when he landed. Stowaway riflemen did not get issued rifles. He grabbed one off a dead Marine in the surf. He checked the chamber. He charged inland through machine gun fire that shredded the air like invisible chainsaws. The volcanic sand was different from any sand the Marines had ever trained on. It was not compact. You could not run on it. With every step, boots sank 6 inches deep. It was like running through loose gravel uphill while people shot at you. Lucas made it off the beach. He found his fire team. There were 4 men total. They pushed toward Airfield No. 1. This was one of 3 airstrips the Americans needed to capture. Capturing them would allow Iwo Jima to be used as an emergency landing field for B-29 bombers returning from raids on Japan. That first night, February 19, Lucas and his fire team dug into a shell crater 500 yards from the airstrip. They could hear the Japanese moving through tunnels and repositioning. The ground literally vibrated from artillery fire. The smell of sulfur from the volcanic vents mixed with the smell of gunpowder and death. Nobody slept. February 20, 1945. This was D+1, the second day of the invasion. Early morning, Lucas and 3 other Marines, a 4-man fire team, began creeping through a twisting ravine toward the airfield. The ravine was maybe 30 feet deep. It was carved through the volcanic rock by centuries of erosion. It twisted like a snake. You could not see more than 15 feet ahead. They spotted an enemy pillbox. It was a Japanese fortification of concrete and steel. It had a machine gun aperture. The Marines took cover in a trench. Then they saw them. There were 11 Japanese soldiers in a parallel trench. They were maybe 20 feet away. The enemy had a tunnel connecting their trench to the pillbox. Lucas raised his rifle. He fired. He dropped 1 Japanese soldier. He fired again. He dropped another. His rifle jammed. It was a standard Marine Corps issue M1 Garand. This rifle had an 8-round clip and was semi-automatic. It was one of the best rifles in World War II. However, it jammed. Lucas looked down to clear the jam. That is when he saw the grenades. There were 2 of them. They were Type 97 hand grenades. These were Japanese, cylindrical, and made of green metal. Each weighed 240 grams. Their fuse delay was 4 to 5 seconds. The fragmentation radius was 50 feet, and the lethal radius was 15 feet. Both grenades were rolling in the trench. They were rolling toward Lucas and toward the 3 other Marines with him. Lucas yelled a warning about grenades. He had maybe 3 seconds, maybe 2. The other Marines froze. There was not time to run. The trench was too narrow, and the grenades were too close. Lucas jumped over one of the Marines. He dove on the first grenade. He jammed it into the volcanic sand with his rifle butt. He pushed it as deep as he could. Then he reached out with his left hand and pulled the second grenade under his body. 2 grenades were under a 17-year-old kid who weighed 180 pounds. 1 grenade exploded. The blast threw Lucas 6 feet into the air. It flipped him onto his back. He landed hard. In his left hand, still clenched, he held the second grenade. It did not explode. However, the first one did explode. He sustained 250 entrance wounds. Shrapnel went through both thighs, through his abdomen, and through his torso. It went through his left arm and through his face. 6 pieces lodged in his brain. 2 pieces lodged in his heart. Metal fragments were in every major organ. Lucas was conscious. He could not speak. His vocal cords were shredded. However, he was conscious. The other 3 Marines did not know that. They saw him get blown into the air. They saw him land motionless. They thought he was dead. They pressed forward. They killed all 11 Japanese soldiers. They drove the enemy back from the trench. Jack Lucas lay there bleeding, unable to speak. He was holding an unexploded grenade in his left hand. 20 minutes later, a Marine patrol passed through the area. They were not looking for Lucas. They did not even know he had been there. They were sweeping for wounded. 1 Marine saw movement. He looked closer. Lucas was alive. The Marine called for a Navy corpsman. Here is what you need to understand about Navy corpsmen. They are not Marines. They are sailors attached to Marine units. They go where Marines go. They do what Marines do. However, they are not trained for combat the way Marines are. They are trained to save lives. The corpsman who reached Lucas did not just treat his wounds. While treating Lucas, he saw a Japanese soldier preparing to throw another grenade at them. The corpsman drew his .45 pistol and shot the soldier dead. He then went back to treating Lucas. That corpsman saved Lucas's life twice in 90 seconds. Stretcher bearers arrived. They carried Lucas through active combat back to the beach. Every step, they were under fire. This included Japanese artillery, sniper fire, and mortar rounds. They made it to the beach by nightfall. Lucas lay on the black sand, waiting for evacuation. He could see Mount Suribachi, the 550-foot volcano at the southern tip of Iwo Jima. He could not know it yet. However, in 3 days, Marines would raise an American flag on that summit. Joe Rosenthal would take the most famous photograph in military history. Lucas would see that flag from a hospital ship. A landing craft took him to the United States ship Samaritan. This was a hospital ship and a floating surgery center. The ship's surgeons looked at Lucas and started counting entry wounds. They counted 250 entrance wounds. They could not count all the internal damage yet. That would take x-rays and exploratory surgery. However, they could see enough. This kid should be dead. He was not dead. His first surgery lasted 3 hours. They removed what shrapnel they could reach. They stabilized his internal bleeding. They sutured 127 separate wounds. Lucas would undergo 21 more surgeries over the next 7 months. From the United States ship Samaritan, he was transferred to field hospitals in Hawaii. Then he went to San Diego and then to Naval Hospital San Francisco. On March 28, 1945, Lucas arrived in San Francisco. On September 18, 1945, The Marine Corps medically discharged him. He was too disabled to continue service. They also did two other things. They reinstated him to his rank of Private First Class, erasing the unauthorized absence charge from his record. They also recommended him for the Medal of Honor. October 5, 1945, the White House, Washington, District of Columbia. The South Lawn was bathed in a warm autumn sun. Over 1,000 people were in attendance. President Harry S. Truman stood on a platform. Behind him were several distinguished guests. These included General George Marshall, the Army Chief of Staff, General George Patton, General Hap Arnold, and Admiral Chester Nimitz were also present. Secretary of Defense James Forrestal completed the group. In the front row sat Jack Lucas's mother and his younger brother. President Truman presented the Medal of Honor to 14 sailors and Marines that day. One recipient was Captain Robert Dunlap. Captain Dunlap was the same officer who had accepted Lucas's surrender aboard the United States ship Duel. He had also assigned Lucas to C Company. Dunlap earned his Medal of Honor on February 20, the same day as Lucas. He received it for leading an assault on a fortified Japanese position. When President Truman placed the Medal of Honor around Lucas's neck, he shared a memorable sentiment. He told Lucas that he would rather be a Medal of Honor recipient than President of the United States. Lucas, then 17 years old, looked at the president. He replied that he would gladly trade places. The crowd erupted in laughter. A parade followed in Washington. Another parade took place 3 days later in New York. Lucas rode in a convertible, standing up. Women threw kisses to him. Some even broke through barricades to kiss him in person. He was 17 years old and a national hero. Lucas was the youngest Marine in history to receive the Medal of Honor. He was also the youngest American serviceman in World War II to receive it. In fact, he was the youngest recipient since the Civil War. He still carried 200 pieces of shrapnel in his body. Strategic impact. Jack Lucas's action had a significant meaning in the larger context of the Battle of Iwo Jima. The 3 Marines he saved that day continued fighting. They helped clear the airfield. They also helped push the Japanese defenders back. One of those Marines fought for another 3 weeks on Iwo Jima. This occurred before the island was declared secure. However, the broader impact of Lucas's actions is harder to quantify. Lucas became a powerful symbol. For Marines on Iwo Jima, he represented the absolute limit of courage. He was a 17-year-old kid who had lied to get into the fight. Then he gave his body to save his friends. 27 Marines and sailors received the Medal of Honor for actions during the Battle of Iwo Jima. This number was more medals of honor than any other single battle in American history. It represented 1/4 of all Medals of Honor awarded to Marines in World War II. The Battle of Iwo Jima lasted 36 days. On March 26, 1945, the island was declared secure. Final casualties showed a grim toll. American forces suffered 26,040 total casualties. 6,821 Americans were killed in action or died of wounds. 19,217 were wounded. Japanese forces suffered 18,844 killed. Only 216 were captured. Almost the entire Japanese garrison fought to the death. This was the only battle in the Pacific Theater where American casualties exceeded Japanese casualties. It was also the only battle where more Americans died capturing the island than Japanese died defending it. America paid a horrific price for 8 square miles of volcanic rock. The reason was airfields. Iwo Jima sat directly between the Mariana Islands, where American B-29 bombers were based, and the Japanese mainland. It was 650 miles from Tokyo. Every B-29 flying to Japan had to pass Iwo Jima. Japanese radar on the island gave early warning. Japanese fighters launched from Iwo Jima's airstrips to intercept bombers. If America controlled Iwo Jima, these threats would end. More importantly, damaged B-29 bombers returning from raids on Japan could make emergency landings on Iwo Jima. This prevented them from ditching in the Pacific Ocean. From March 1945 to the end of the war in August 1945, more than 2,200 B-29 bombers made emergency landings on Iwo Jima. This meant 24,000 American airmen lived because Marines took that island. Consider the numbers. 6,008. 121 Americans died taking Iwo Jima. However, 24,000 Americans lived because Iwo Jima became an emergency airfield. Jack Lucas was one of 70,000 Marines who made that possible. If you want to see how this story ends, keep watching. Jack Lucas's story did not end at the White House in 1945. Post-war, Lucas returned to Plymouth, North Carolina. On his first day of 9th grade, he walked into his old high school. He had left it at age 13. He wore his Medal of Honor around his neck. He finished high school. Then he attended High Point University in North Carolina on the government issue bill. He graduated in 1956 with a business degree. He tried his hand at business. He raised cattle. He processed and sold beef around Washington, District of Columbia. He made decent money, but something was missing from his life. In 1961, at age 33, Jack Lucas enlisted in the United States Army. He did not rejoin the Marines as he had already served there. He wanted something different, and he wanted to conquer his fear of heights. He became a paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne Division. During a training jump at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, both of Lucas's parachutes failed. His main parachute deployed but became tangled and unusable. His reserve parachute also deployed but became tangled and unusable. Lucas fell 3,500 feet with no working parachute. Against all odds, he survived. He hit the ground hard enough that everyone who saw it thought he was dead. However, Lucas rolled at the last second. This was an old football roll he had learned as a kid. His stocky build absorbed the impact. He walked away with broken ribs and bruises. The medics at Fort Bragg could not believe it. A man had fallen 3,500 feet with 2 failed parachutes and walked away. They started calling him indestructible. Lucas served in the 82nd Airborne until 1965. He volunteered to deploy to Vietnam as the war was heating up. Lucas wanted to return to combat. However, the Army refused. He was considered too valuable as a trainer. They kept him at Fort Bragg, training younger troops who would deploy to Vietnam. Lucas retired from the Army in 1965 as a captain. He was not done surviving, however. His house caught fire, but he escaped. His wife even took out a contract to have him murdered, but the hitman failed. In 2006, Lucas wrote his autobiography. He titled it Indestructible, The Unforgettable Story of a Marine Hero at the Battle of Iwo Jima. The title proved accurate. Legacy. Today, instructors at the Marine Corps War College in Quantico, Virginia, teach a case study on selfless courage. They use Jack Lucas's after-action report from February 20, 1945. The United States Marine Corps Museum in Quantico displays Lucas's Medal of Honor in a glass case. Adjacent to it are several items. These include photographs from Iwo Jima, his rifle, and his dog tags. A piece of shrapnel removed from his body is also there. At the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, an entire exhibit covers the Battle of Iwo Jima. Jack Lucas's story is prominently featured. On August 3, 2006, Jack Lucas attended a ceremony at Marine Barracks, Washington. 16 living Marine Corps Medal of Honor recipients gathered. Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Michael Hagee, presented each of them with the Medal of Honor flag. This flag is light blue with 13 white stars. It is awarded to all Medal of Honor recipients. Lucas, then 78 years old, stood with the other recipients. He expressed how seeing the young men rejuvenated his heart. He also stated his increased love for the Corps, knowing his country was defended by such fine young people. On June 5, 2008, in Hattiesburg, Mississippi, Jack Lucas died of leukemia at age 80. He was surrounded by his family. This included his wife Ruby, his 4 sons, 1 daughter, 7 grandchildren, and 6 great-grandchildren. He is buried in Hattiesburg with full military honors. His casket was draped with an American flag. Marines in dress blue stood guard. On September 18, 2016, Secretary of the Navy Ray Mabus made an announcement. A new Arleigh Burke-class destroyer would be named the United States ship Jack H. Lucas. This destroyer, designated DDG-125, features a Flight 3 configuration. It represents the most advanced destroyer class in the United States Navy. The keel was laid in 2019 at Ingalls Shipbuilding in Pascagoula, Mississippi. The ship was launched on June 4, 2021. It was christened on March 26, 2022. The destroyer was commissioned on October 7, 2023 in Tampa, Florida. Ruby Lucas, Jack's widow, served as one of the ship's sponsors. At the commissioning ceremony, she gave the traditional order. She commanded them to man the ship and bring her to life. 330 sailors and Marines brought the United States ship Jack H. Lucas to life. The ship's motto is indestructible. This powerful destroyer is 505 feet long. It displaces 9,700 tons. It carries over 90 missiles. It also features the ANSPY 6V1 air and missile defense radar, the most advanced radar system in the world. The United States ship Jack H. Lucas is homeported in San Diego, California. When the keel of the United States ship Iwo Jima was laid in 1997, Jack Lucas placed his Medal of Honor citation inside the hull. It remains there today, sealed within the ship. The ship sails carrying Lucas's words, which describe conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The 4 Marines in that trench on February 20, 1945, came from different places. Jack Lucas hailed from Plymouth, North Carolina, a tobacco farming community with a population of 4,000. The names of the other 3 Marines are not recorded in most histories. They survived the war and went home. They lived full lives because a 17-year-old kid decided his life was worth less than theirs. The official records do not fully convey the experience. They do not describe what it felt like in that trench when the grenades landed. They also omit the split second Lucas had to make his decision. The certainty that covering those grenades meant dying is also not expressed, nor is the hope that perhaps he could push them deep enough into the sand to contain the blast. The records do not detail the explosion that tore through his body. His inability to scream because his vocal cords were shredded is also missing. He lay there, conscious but unable to speak. He watched his friends continue the fight, thinking they had left him for dead. Then came the relief when someone finally saw he was still alive. The pain of 21 surgeries over 7 months followed. He carried 200 pieces of shrapnel in his body for 63 years. Official history does not fully capture these details. Official history provides the facts. Private First Class Jacklyn Harold Lucas of the 1st Battalion, 26 Marines, 5th Marine Division, threw himself on 2 grenades. He saved 3 Marines. He received the Medal of Honor. However, facts alone do not tell you about the fear. They do not convey the split-second decision. They cannot express the absolute conviction that saving your friends is worth dying for. That is why stories like this matter. Jack Lucas was not a superhero. He was a kid. He was a kid who lied about his age. He stowed away on a combat transport. He was a kid who wanted to fight so badly that he would rather die trying than live safely in the rear. When the moment came, 2 grenades rolled into a trench. He had perhaps 3 seconds to decide. He made the only choice that mattered to him. He saved his friends. If this story moved you in the same way it moved us, please do us a favor right now. Hit that like button. Every single like tells YouTube to show this story to more people. Please subscribe and turn on notifications. We are rescuing forgotten stories from dusty archives every single day. These are stories about teenagers who lied their way into combat. They are also stories about Marines who refused to quit. We share stories about sailors who charged when they should have run. These are real people and real heroism. Drop a comment right now. Tell us where you are watching from. Perhaps you are in the United States, the United Kingdom, or Canada. Maybe you are watching from Australia, the Philippines, or India. Other viewers are in Germany, France, or Japan. Our community stretches across the entire world. You are not just a viewer. You are part of keeping these memories alive. Tell us your location. Tell us if someone in your family served. Let us know if you knew Jack Lucas's story before watching this. Just let us know you are here. Thank you for watching. Thank you for making sure Private First Class, Jack Lucas, and the thousands of Marines who fought on Iwo Jima do not disappear into silence. On February 20, 1945, a 17-year-old kid made a decision. That decision saved 3 lives and inspired generations of Marines. He carried 200 pieces of shrapnel for the rest of his life. He survived 2 parachute failures, a house fire, and a murder-for-hire plot. He lived to be 80 years old. Today, a 9,700-ton destroyer bearing his name sails the Pacific Ocean. It carries his legacy forward. These men deserve to be remembered. You are helping make that happen.